Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation. You can contact us as well by email, ogc@accessradio.biz. Biz, of course, is spelled B-I-Z. So please enjoy today's guest, who describes himself as a promedian, that is, a preacher and a comedian. He has been a full-time comedian since the mid-noughties and has racked up well over 2,000 gigs since then. Our guest has also had a few books published, including Stand Up and Deliver, which was about starting out as a rookie on the comedy circuit. His latest book, The Wayfarer, was recently released. So, why did our guest decide to go full-time as a comedian? How did he get into comedy? Why did he become a preacher/promedian? What did other comedians think of him on the circuit when they found out he is a Christian? What are his boundaries in venues and jokes, etc.? What did his family think when they are mentioned in his routine? And what has he learnt about himself and his faith since his divorce and being on the comedy circuit? All these questions, so many answers coming our way. It gives me great pleasure to welcome today to Off-Grid Christianity, and that is Andy Kind. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today, sir. For those that don't know you, where are we speaking to you from?
Hello, sir. Great to be with you. I'm in Newcastle under Lyme in Staffordshire, close to where you get all your pottery from.
And oatcakes, of course.
Oatcakes, Staffordshire oatcakes, yeah, real treat.
And the monkey forest, but that's another story altogether.
Certainly is, yeah. But, biggest one in Europe.
Apparently so. Totally deserved accolade, that. So let's go for it then. 5 pertinent questions, or maybe not so pertinent. Question number 1. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask him questions, who would it be, Andy?
It would be the Victorian writer Jerome K. Jerome, who wrote Three Men in a Boat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it would be him.
That's very good. Never had that answer before, so tell me why.
Because he's my favourite writer. He's the biggest influence on my writing. Three Men in a Boat is an almost unfeasible book because it was written in the 1880s and yet feels incredibly modern in its humour and its mirth. And it's an amazing book, but what makes it even more amazing is it's not really about anything at all. It's supposed to be about a journey he took along the Thames, which he didn't actually do with the people he claims to have done. So it's a fictional tale. It's absolutely extraordinary. And the way he just goes off on tangents, written tangents as well, deliberate written tangents. So I love that book. I've read some of his other stuff as well. And I just find it amazing when those Victorian people who we think of as being quite straight-laced and pious employ what we would still think of as quite pioneering humour. So, yeah, Jerome K. Jerome for me.
That's a great answer. The thing is, because obviously I'm going to go back in my time machine to bring him to you, you might say, well, look, I've only got a few minutes, so you're allowed one question. What one question would you ask him? What
was your influence for Three Men in a Boat, or did you invent the humorous travel writing genre? Or maybe I'd just ask, do you realise that you probably invented the humorous travel writing genre?
Fantastic. That'd be really good. Of course, you have to cook him a meal, so what would you cook him?
I would cook him spaghetti bolognese, because he probably hasn't tasted it.
Your version, anyway.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say an oatcake filled with cheese and bacon.
No. They probably existed when he was around. He's probably had because he was from South Staffordshire. So
was he?
Yeah. He's probably had an oatcake.
And why is he called Jerome K. Jerome? I'm assuming that's not his real name. So
it nearly is his real name, though. I think his name was Jerome, and I think the K is actually his real surname, which is not Kafka, but it's something like that.
Okay.
I mean, I could look it up while we're talking, but I probably won't. But yeah, I think he just came up with it as a pen name. It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it?
Yeah, but it sticks out though, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
All about the selling. That's a great answer. Thank you so much. And of course, Three Men in a Boat, that has inspired so many TV programmes to date, hasn't it?
Yeah, and other books as well. Oh, Jerome Klapka.
Oh, you're close.
Jerome Klapka Jerome. That was his name.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did look it up.
Jerome.
Jerome.
Yeah.
Forerunner to Duran.
I was just going to say the same thing. Although I don't think Jerome K. Jerome was in Barbarella. But there you go.
Oh.
Question 2. And people say, why are you saying that? That's where Duran got the name from. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please, Andy?
Favourite story is found in the final chapter of the final gospel, John 21. It's where Jesus meets Peter on a beach, having first met him on a beach, and this is post-resurrection. And Jesus comes along the beach, and Peter's gone back to fishing, and they've been out all night fishing, and they haven't caught anything. And Jesus says, take your net and put it on the other side of the boat. And they go from nothing to abundance. And that really marks the redemption story of the Apostle Peter, who was, like me, a moral failure and a coward. And yet the Lord meets him, and God is fully aware, Jesus is fully aware of what Peter has done, that he's denied him 3 times. One of the denials was at a charcoal fire. There's 2 charcoal fires mentioned in the New Testament. One is at one of the denials, and the second one is on this beach where Jesus has prepared fish for Peter. And Jesus says 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" Which is 3 recommissionings to overwrite Peter's 3 handings in of his commission. So 3 times Peter denies and rejects Jesus. 3 times Jesus builds him back up and offers him back his mantle, if you like. And I love that, because that is what God is like. He meets the people who disregard him, disobey him, flee from him, discredit him, swear at him, swear about him, don't believe in him, try and set up YouTube channels to disprove his existence. And he would simply say to people, "Come and have breakfast. Let's have a chat. Let's have something to eat and talk about where we go from here." That is what God is like.
That's a great answer. And I'm going to come back to your opening gambit, if that's all right, as soon as we've done the 5 questions. I did say at the very beginning, off air, that quite often we go off on a tangent. And you mentioned the word coward. So I'd like to pick up on that, if that's okay. Excellent. Thank you. Question 3. If you were Prime Minister for the day and could change any law or impose a new law, what would it be, please, Andy?
Compulsory purchase of The Wayfarer by Andy Kind. That's my answer.
And amazingly enough, Andy, it's the same Andy Kind that's with us today.
I know.
Amazing.
Amazing how these, like a sliding doors moment, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my answer. That would be
That's a very good answer. And that's not to do with promotional value or anything else like that.
No.
Question is, though, why should we have to read it? If we have to buy it, why should we have to read it?
Well, you don't if you buy it. I don't care if you read it or not. It's your life, isn't it?
It's very true.
It's my law.
It's a very good law. Do we get a discount?
No.
Okay. Can't we have installments to pay it off?
No, you can't. What we could probably do is offer a code for people who listen to the Off-Grid Christianity podcast, couldn't we?
And get a signed copy or something.
You won't get a signed copy. No, I mean, you're making it too complicated here, Martin. I just want a simple life, really.
To get all the royalties that are coming in through it.
That's right.
Well, interesting. We'll see what happens on that one. Do you know, that's another answer never been given before. Well done. That's 2. Question 4. Outside of family events, Andy, what has been your most enjoyable day out?
Outside of family events, I don't do days out. 1 step away from hermit level. The thing is, my work is several days out a week.
Yeah.
So that just feels like a job. My favourite day outs are always to do with my girls. So once a year, we go to Alton Towers overnight, and we have 2 days at Alton Towers, and we just have an amazing, really amazing time. We go in June when it's nice and hot, but before the schools have broken up.
Exactly.
I would just say that it's technically a family event, but it's by far my favourite thing. There are a few others now that I think about it. I remember in 2020, during the pandemic, August 2020, when things had started to open up a bit, I went to Lyme Regis on my own for a week, and I went walking, and I had a lovely walk up to Golden Cap near Lyme Regis. Did a massive sort of 12-mile round trip, and it was really, really hot. And I've got a selfie of myself on top of Golden Cap, and I remember thinking that was a really lovely day. So I'll say that.
We're a bunch of old fossils, you and me. That's just a play on Lyme Regis, of course. For those listening around the world, if you want to get a fossil, go to Lyme Regis. That is right, isn't it?
Yeah, Mary Anning.
Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment to date, please, Andy?
I must have had lots, but there isn't anything that sticks out. I find embarrassment is a bit overrated.
Yeah.
I find it a bit self-indulgent and prideful. It's a waste of time. Being embarrassed is a waste of time, as though anybody is important enough to worry about your mistakes, as though anyone has an authority to judge your mistakes, or as though anybody cares enough about you to feel the same embarrassment that you do. So I don't go around feeling embarrassed. I feel lots of other things. I feel guilty for lots of things and regretful for lots of things and ashamed of myself on plenty of occasions. But I almost never feel embarrassed. I must have slipped over in an embarrassing way once. I must have got locked in a toilet once, but
yeah.
I just can't think of anything in particular, really.
An honest answer. And I think this podcast is going to be very honest. Well, thank you for that. If this was a vlog, a video version of it, people say, well, I'm surprised that when it came to inviting somebody for an evening meal, you haven't chosen Tolkien, because at the back, you've got the Rivendell picture and the Shire picture.
Yeah. And I love Lord of the Rings. And I love that whole Inklings movement of Tolkien, Lewis and Owen Barfield and all those guys. And I don't think their work has ever been more relevant, actually. I think the way that they talked about awe and longing and beauty, and they did that through imaginings, and they did that through fantasy and mythology, because really Lord of the Rings is mythology rather than fantasy. I don't think that's ever been more relevant. And I do think that within the Christian world, we have failed to keep hold of beauty. It's very much the forgotten argument in apologetics. And we have failed to really understand and capture beauty in effective terms. I think storytelling and beauty and longing and weirdness and wildness is something that is very tantalizing for people. And I actually think it's an amazing signpost to Christ. And yet within the evangelical world, of which I am a part, there's very little that is being done to use these gifts, if you like. There's very few people ploughing the furrow from beauty through creativity towards evangelism. And there's probably lots of reasons for that. I can talk to that if you like.
A warning here, if everyone's listening expecting to have a laugh a minute, I don't think this podcast is going to be it somehow, because I think you've got so much to share for what you've gone through. And that's part of what this podcast is about, how we can learn from. So with that in mind, then, you said two words in there that I really picked up on, and that is the Inklings.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a pub that hopefully one day will reopen, because I want to go there in Oxford, the Eagle and Child, which is still locked up. But apparently the word on the streets is that they're doing it up and going to take it back to how it used to be in the 1920s. And the Inklings, when I first heard about it, is something that I really adhere to, whereby you can go with your mates from different denominations, sit down over a pint and discuss. And the reason why I am still a Christian today is because of my lifestyle back in England. I was with Christians who we would go to the pub, not to get bladdered, to enjoy, sit down and have an open discussion because you were friends. And that's how I've learned, and that's how I believe one of the main reasons why I've stayed the course as a Christian today. What do the Inklings mean to you? Well,
very similar stuff. And they would have more than one pint as well. Lewis would regularly have 2 pints for lunch. And this is obviously whilst they're smoking their pipes, of course. And so maybe you want to say, oh, the beer probably wasn't as strong. I suspect it probably was as strong. But I love the fact that these people were super, super intelligent Oxford academics, and they were meeting up to drink and tell each other stories. And out of that group came Narnia. Out of that group came Middle-earth, which today, I mean, they're just almost finished remaking a new series on Netflix, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
They're doing the whole Narnia series. The themes and the sense of transcendence is still as popular as it's ever been. And it all started in the Eagle and Child pub in Oxford. So I just love that. And I do think that we need to give people like Owen Barfield more credit as well. And also that Lewis's hero, George MacDonald, it's very easy, isn't it, for Christians to say, oh, as C.S. Lewis says, or as Tolkien says, there's lots of other good stuff out there as well. And these are the most recognizable names, but they were all helped. And C.S. Lewis, interestingly, was massively influenced by E.M. Forster, who was not part of that group at all. I've just been reading a series of E.M. Forster short stories. There's a lot of Narnia references. There's a Great Divorce reference. You can see the influences on both Narnia and the Great Divorce from these 3 short stories. And I just think that we have dismissed beauty as fairy tale. We have dismissed figurative things as being irrelevant. This is contentious, but I don't really care. The evangelical world in the UK has no imagination whatsoever. And we have lost that. Unless we get it back, then other people who tell their other worldviews, by which I mean other people, as it stands, other people are telling their defunct stories better than we're telling our beautiful one, because we don't know how to make the gospel beautiful. The best you'll hear when you're listening to preachers is them saying, the gospel is beautiful, the gospel is an adventure. Well, in writing, you have to show and not tell. If you're writing a sitcom or a show, not tell. Telling somebody that something is beautiful doesn't get them close to the experience of beauty. But of course, there are ways to get people to the experience of beauty. And that in itself isn't enough. You actually do have to, at some point, help them see why the transcendent points to Jesus. You do have to do that. But we are not very good at being creative and being imaginative, particularly in our preaching and in our writing, because we're led by teachers, we're led by academics. The Christian world, most churches are led by teachers and academics, not by creatives, not by performers. There's loads of things wrong with performers. You wouldn't want a performer as a senior leader. You wouldn't want me as a senior pastor. It'd be an absolute disaster. But yeah, it's a bit of a bee in my bonnet. But again, I don't really care. It is what I believe, and I'm not trying to offend anyone.
No.
As somebody who works in the arts and who is a writer and who engages with a lot of writing from outside the Christian world, when I step back into the Christian world and I see the books that sell in the Christian world, I just think we have almost nobody who holds a candle to the best storytellers in the secular world. We do have a few, but we don't have more than a few. The books that sell don't sell because they're well written. They don't sell because the writers are wordsmiths. They sell because they're popular Christians who've decided they've got a new project.
The name sells it,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I suppose, the same with all kinds of sponsorship that we see on TV as well. It's one of those things. But I want to pick up on what you said there, because I think we can delve deeper and use it from your point of view. The fact that we have to show, and I love the St. Francis play on the Great Commission, go out to all the world and preach the good news. And if all else fails, use words. So consequently, we should be able to show the beauty of Christ in what we do. I think that sums up what you were saying. And one of the things is to actually be in the workplace. Another place to be is in the media, of which we see, and you could say, oh yes, but various companies won't employ Christians. So let's put it from your point of view then. On the comedy circuit, what doors were closed in your face when they found out you were a Christian?
Difficult to say, really, because you probably don't hear from the people who don't book you. But I can give you a list of people who haven't booked me. And, I'm 20 years along this comedy track now. I don't think about comedy very much. It's still what pays the bills primarily, and I still work hard. But when I go to a gig, I don't think about the gig until I've arrived. I don't get excited about it. And as soon as I've left, I probably stop thinking about it, because there's a sort of luxury having done it for 20 years. So I still really enjoy it when I'm on stage. Of the things that I do, comedy is the thing I think about the least, and I'm probably not on the circuit anymore. My gigs really these days are exclusively church outreach events, which I do find a real privilege and often a pleasure. That's been my bread and butter for a while. I have had bouts back on the comedy circuit, and that is, of course, where I started. And I'm so glad I started there, because doing a gig in a church doesn't make you a better comedian. It doesn't make you sharp. The comedy circuit makes you sharp. Church gigs pay the bills. And so it's been very important to head back onto the comedy circuit for seasons, which I did a couple of years ago and had an amazing time. And I get more energy and I get more joy and more happiness from doing gigs on the comedy circuit, generally speaking, than I do for churches. Although when a church gig is organized well and goes well, which is often the case, that's a really beautiful thing. And when you see people coming along to church as a result, that's great. That, of course, is the mission. But I'm not primarily an evangelist. I'm primarily a writer who performs what he writes. Again, maybe what some people would expect me to say is, the main thing is just that, God is glorified through my work. Well, the primary thing is that my work is as good as it can be.
Yes.
Of course I want God to be glorified. Of course I want people to become Christians. But it goes back to what I was saying about bad Christian books. I would genuinely rather write a really good book, a really good story that leads no one to Christ, than write a sort of phoned in bootleg tract which sees hundreds of people come to Christ. Maybe that's the wrong priority, but I'm a writer. I love words. The gift I've been given is from God, and I want to use it as well as possible, which for me means becoming as good as possible, continuing to get as good as possible, and writing stuff that is beautiful, not just stuff that is functional and instructive. I'm being very grumpy, Martin, aren't I? This is great.
Well, it's great because you've been honest, and that's what I want. to pick up on a couple of things there as well, because we need to obviously, we need to get back to how you came on the circuit.
Yeah.
For those that are going, what do you mean? Hundreds of tracks coming and you don't want to write that? Well, if we put it into context, when I went into Christian radio, 1994, one of the first things that I picked up on regarding stats was regarding the Billy Graham organisation. And obviously we had the big 1984-85 mission to England. And as people might be aware, when you go to this, if you're invited forward, it's so well organised, you give your name and then you'll be given an address and the people contact you from various churches in the weeks to come. Their survey showed that out of the 100% of people that came forward, how many have lasted the course. And the number of people that actually still were Christian several years later, as to what we perceive to be Christian, it was phenomenal, as in badly phenomenal. I think it was between 5 and 10% actually still stayed the course.
Yeah.
Let's look at Andy Kind, who has lasted the course from the day he became a Christian, whenever that was, but also pick up on why you went into the comedy circuit in the first place. So over to you, good sir.
Yeah, I've always believed in God. I became a Christian, as in I made the choice as an adult to start following Jesus when I was 22. Yeah, probably a lot of people would be surprised where I've ended up, because I was quite hedonistic even as a young Christian. I was quite moralistic as well, but I was quite hedonistic probably. And now I'm quite grumpy and a bit isolationist. I don't really like meeting new people. I don't really like, I hate chit chat. I hate small talk. So I don't spend much time with many people. I sort of already care about the people I want to care about. So I've become a bit of a grumpy middle-aged man. I'll be 45 next month, and so that fits. But actually, for all my seeming cynicism, I do love the church, and I do love the gospel, and I do know that it's the only story of hope for humanity. Nowhere else are you offered any real sense of hope, any real sense of redemption, in none of the other religions or worldviews. I think there's some amazing philosophies out there. Stoicism is an amazing philosophy. From if you mix in a bowl Stoicism and biblical Christianity, you get the English gentleman, which is something I try and aspire to be. So I think there's some good stuff, small g, everywhere, and there's lots of little meanings, small m, everywhere. But if you do want big meaning, if you do want ultimate meaning and ultimate grace and ultimate love, then you've got to come to the cross, really. And that's a very evangelical thing to say, isn't it? But that's the game-changing denouement of the cosmos, of the universal timeline. That is the point at which we go from guaranteed catastrophe to guaranteed, what Tolkien will call, eucatastrophe. That's where the universe gets its happy ending. That's the origin of the universe's happy ending, if you like. It starts the second half of the story. How did I get into comedy? I always wanted to be a comedian. When I became a Christian at the age of 22, and I decided to go from liking to subscribing, if you like, in the space of a few weeks, I got 3 or 4 prophetic words. I wouldn't have known that they were that then, but prophetic words about being on stage, about doing comedy. And so I just gave it a go. And I think if I'd done comedy and it had gone badly, I wouldn't have done a second gig. If my first gig had been bad, there wouldn't have been a second gig. Lots of people try comedy for the first time. But it went well, and I just remember thinking, yeah, this is what Jesus wants me to do. I still think to a degree that's what he wants me to do. I keep trying to ask him to make me travel less, cause me to travel less, because I am tired. I am exhausted a lot of the time. And I'd like to, whilst I still have love for comedy and there's nothing quite like being on stage, I would like to stop doing it, but I don't have any means. So expediency insists that I continue to do it. And I think 2 decades is enough. There's nothing more for me to learn. There's nothing more for me to achieve, which is possible for me to achieve. I don't have completed comedy. I haven't. I've done much more and significantly less than I thought I would. But there's nowhere for me to take it now. There's no new ground to be broken. So yeah, I really just like to sit at home and write, and I like to preach, and I like to read. So I'd like to be at home more, and most of my conversations with God are about suggesting that he finds a way of keeping me at home more so that I can write and still pay for shoes for my daughters.
Yeah. And we'll talk about your latest book in a minute, obviously, The Wayfarer. Whilst you've still got your comedy hat on, if that's okay.
Although, as you'll have noticed, I don't really wear a comedy hat these days, and that's been a big change for over the last few years. I don't think of myself as the joker anymore. I'm not trying to impress people by making them laugh. It's not that I have a higher calling, but I don't think comedically in the way that I used to. I'm not bouncy and energetic. I'm not a young Russell Howard as I was when I started out. I think about other things. The 22-year-old Andy Kind would hate me saying this, but I'm much more likely to read a book of poetry than I am to watch a comedy special. And it pains me to say that, but it's true.
Well, let's delve in a bit more if that's okay. When you were on the comedy circuit, and you never know, you might go back again because the Wayfarer book might become so phenomenally successful that all those royalties coming to you, you can buy a private jet and helicopter and fly to gigs and back in a night.
And a boat.
Oh, you want a boat as well, do you? It's been a bit greedy, I think, there, Andy. I think just stick with a jet and helicopter, if that's all right. Keep yourself humble. Frank Skinner, comedian. Apparently, he's going back to church. I read somewhere years ago, and he was challenged big time by a mate of his to say, you're naturally funny. Why do you have to F and Jess all this time? Why can't you do a gig? Because I'm sure people find it just as funny without you swearing. So he took it as a challenge, and he did a tour without one single swear word. And he noticed that the humour was just as funny, people were laughing just as much as when he did a gig with the swearing in. But then eventually he said, well, no, I prefer swearing in, so he kept it in. So there's obviously a place for comedy where you don't have to cuss all the time, for want of a better word. What about yourself then? What about the decisions that you have to make sure that you don't cross a line? And the reason why I'm asking this is because it doesn't just apply to comedy. It applies to all areas in life, especially if you're at the crossroads of life, like a 22-year-old, where you're thinking, well, should I go down there, but it might mean this, especially in the entertainment industry. Should I go down there, it might mean that if it's in the political industry, whatever. What would you say?
I think the first thing to say is that you're going to make mistakes, and people are going to try and condemn you for those mistakes, even though they're mistakes, they're not willful sin. I don't swear on stage because I don't really swear in real life, because I think I've got a better vocabulary than that. But that's not to be cynical. And again, I don't think that comedians shouldn't swear. I don't even think that I shouldn't. I just don't. Although there is one, at the end of the Wayfarer, there is one swear word, which is absolutely there for a reason. And I champion my right to put that in because it's the most effective word to use. I like to use words effectively.
Yeah.
One of the biggest compliments I get, or comments that I get after gigs, is, oh, it's so nice to have a bit of clean comedy. Great. But I don't care that I'm clean. I only care if I'm funny. I only care that I'm funny. I'm naturally clean, but it's incidental. I'm not going out there to prove to people that I'm clean. Who cares? That has no creative value whatsoever. And I loved it when Frank Skinner did that. I find swearing, it grieves me when I think it's gratuitous, as in when it's not the most effective thing to say, or it's too cheap and it's too crass. But I think language can be used effectively, and Anglo-Saxon has some nice sounds that really have an impact. The k sound that we get from Anglo-Saxon, it can be used to great effect at times. For me to swear on stage, it would be to completely misread the room. And again, it's just an extension of myself. But I champion, what I do think comedians should do is they should speak authentically from their own voice. And I disagree with lots of comedians about the meaning of life and the universe and everything. But I don't think they should do what I have to do, because I'm not a moralist, and I'm not a life coach, a Christian life coach. I like people who are using creativity, and it goes back to that thing about using the gifts that you've been given, and trying to sanitize everything, which is what we have done in Protestantism. Trying to sanitize everything actually takes some of the, not beauty necessarily in this case, but some of the power out of it. Yeah, I try and straddle the line. I hate gratuitousness. I hate people who use language to really show off or to get cheap laughs. What I really always hate is sexual stuff in comedy, because actually I think the beauty of sex comes along with a privacy. Sex lives should be private. Again, this is the English gentleman in me. I find all of that very uncomfortable, and I do find that offensive, because again, I just don't think that's what stages were made for. But I have no problem with people using language. I have no problem with people trying to make fun of Christianity if they're not Christians. Why shouldn't they do that? I think people need to speak authentically from their own worldview and their own voice.
But then at that crossroads of life, for a 22-year-old person that's thinking, well, I don't know, I've been praying about it, but I don't know where to go down that avenue. And it could be any genre, airline pilot, whatever. You still took the gamble with a small G of trying out the comedy circuit. And I don't know what you were doing in your previous life before going into comedy. So,
I was doing nothing.
Right. Well, you were doing nothing. That's important to do nothing. That is important. You still had to take that step. So for somebody today that's listening, thinking, I need to do something. God, you've given me 2 or 3 doors, but I'm scared to go through, like it must be to go on stage. What would you say to them?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think in terms of how we conduct ourselves, you either want to follow Jesus or you don't. If you don't want to, and you don't want to be known for doing that, then don't. For a short amount of time, you'll have a lot more fun before everything falls apart. But things can also fall apart when you're following Jesus. But I think if you've decided that you really do believe the gospel, if you've decided that you really are a Christian, then you should act like that. And this was said beautifully by Eberechi Eze, the Arsenal player, who gave one of the greatest testimonies I've ever heard on Sunday after the Arsenal beat Spurs 4-1. And he's just so open about his faith. He's open about his prayer. He was being interviewed on Sky Sports in front of millions of people. And he was talking as though it was Pam Rhodes on Songs of Praise. It was absolutely incredible.
What did he say?
He said, I prayed for a hat trick and God gave it to me, man. So that was lovely.
Can I just say, on Eze, he actually had a trial for Bristol City.
Did he actually? Wow.
He did. He was turned down to go with several other clubs that were following him. And he admitted in an interview, he said, and I don't blame him because I was rubbish.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. You're going to make mistakes. Being called to something, God equips us as we go, and I do believe that he does. But it's not like winning the national lottery. Well, I made the mistake of thinking when God called me into comedy that I was going to be the greatest comedian in the world. I was instantly going to rise through the ranks. That isn't what happens. And nor should that be what happens, because it doesn't prepare you for anything. It doesn't give you character. It doesn't give you humility. And I probably, in terms of the comedy circuit and the world of comedy, I haven't raised as high as I should have done, really. I'm probably not quite as good as I hoped I would be. I think I am still excellent, but I'm not as good as I thought I would be, or probably as I should have become. Anyone going into anything feeling called as a Christian, what you need to be prepared for is the harshness and hardness of it. And if God has called you, then he is with you in it, and there is a purpose in it. But what you must not do if you go into something is expect everything to fall into your lap, like Eze, who's one of the best players in England and just scored a hat-trick for his boyhood club in the North London derby, but was turned down by Reading, by Millwall, by
Bristol City,
released by Arsenal. Yeah. If you feel like God's called you to write a book, don't expect an agent to just turn up at your door. Expect lots of rejections. If you get into comedy, expect loads of bad gigs. If you want to get into singing, well, take singing lessons because you need to get better. Whatever it is, you have to work hard. God will use what we give him. He doesn't tend to use what we don't give him. If we don't give stuff to the Lord, there isn't very much he can do with it. You know, if with the loaves and the fishes miracle, he said, bring them to me. If the disciples had taken them in the opposite direction, we probably wouldn't have had that miracle. So you do have to give God what you've got. You don't need to give him more than you've got, because that's all you've got. And you trust that he will use it. But you also trust, I think what I would try and drill in to the younger version of me is that you are not the main character, and life is not a story about you. And it is not a fairy tale. And your ideas of where God is going to take you are probably drawn more from Hollywood and Disney than they are from real life, or they are from scripture. Probably 11 of the 12 original disciples were martyred for their faith.
Yeah.
And they were Jesus's top boys. So it doesn't mean God doesn't love to bless. God's blessed me amazingly, and I hope and believe he's going to continue to do that. But I think probably where I'm at is just, and this, all of what I said is sort of gives you some context for why I talk in the way that I talk, because actually working in the arts, it's mainly rejection and it's mainly failure for almost everybody. And so all you can do is work hard, get better, and keep asking God to bless what you're doing. You cannot do anything else. The Wayfarer, I believe, is certainly my best ever book. I doubt I'll write anything as good as that again. It took 3 years of hard work, but I can't control the sales. All I can do is write the book.
Yes.
And pray for the right contacts and pray that very public people say very public things about it. But I can't guarantee anything like that. You just can't control much in the arts. All you can control is your character, which is how you treat people, how close you are to God, and your creative input. You can control your creative input. And don't worry too much about the creative output. The more you put in, the more stuff will come out. It is like a Fisher-Price plasticine thing. You churn it in and some stuff will come out.
Yeah.
There is also a lot of waste, though. I've got on my laptop, on open tabs, I've got at least 12 short stories that I've written the first paragraph of, and probably 3 or 4 of them will end up being completed stories. There is a lot of waste. When you're operating in your anointing, then that's when you feel most alive. I feel most alive when I'm sitting at this desk writing, even if it doesn't become anything. That's when I feel most alive. That's what I feel is my main calling, my main anointing.
Well, we'll talk about the Wayfarer. Sorry.
Wayfarer.
I know. That's why I went like that.
Yeah.
The Wayfarer. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, because for someone to spend 3 years on it, that is obviously an amazing passion. And when you were sharing what you just shared, that reminded me of a 3-year-old myself. I have a photograph, which I still have to this day, of me playing records, because that's all I ever wanted to do. And I did it. I achieved it. But actually, it never got me to Radio 1, never got me to Radio 2, which you obviously think, I am going to be able to do that eventually. Never got me there, but I'm still here. Despite my situation of the past 20 years of having to give it all up, I am still here. And I think that if you put together with what you're sharing as well, to someone who's standing at that door thinking, which door do I go through? As someone very succinctly put it to me, it works. Go through it. Learn the knockbacks, because there will be, but you can be stronger as a result of that. Yeah.
The reality is that we don't go from glory to glory to glory to glory to glory. We go from glory to failure, to plateauing, back to failure, to progress, to temporary success, fleeting glory, and then back to slogging. And after 20 years of comedy, it still feels like a slog. It feels like a trap. It's called a job. That's what it is.
Yeah, it is.
And I think you're absolutely right, Martin. I think if you feel a calling on your life, then that's a brilliant thing. For God to call us to something that we really want to do is a real joy and a real blessing. But again, it's not a fairy tale. It's not a fantasy novel.
No.
Because life is hard, the industry is hard. And the only way that you do well in an industry is by being as good as other people in the industry. This is why I find Christian literature very disappointing, because it's nowhere near as good as some of the best stuff in the industry. And it's not even trying to be, but it probably is claiming to be. Pick up any Christian book and you'll see there's one guy in particular. Here I am being grumpy again. On one of his books, and he's an amazing Christian man. He is an amazing Christian man. He's way better than I am. But on the back of one of his books, there's a quote from another well-known Christian saying, "This is a masterpiece from a master storyteller." And I read the book and I would have given it about 1 out of 10. There's nothing masterful about it. But this is what we do in the Christian world. Because we don't have real excellence in most places, we've got people like Martin Shaw, we've got people like Francis Spufford, we've got people like Veronica Bright, who no one's ever heard of because she's not a famous Christian. She's probably the best short storyteller who's a Christian in the UK today. We do have people who are excellent storytellers, excellent wordsmiths, but we don't have many. And if you don't know those people, then what we tend to do is we tend to elevate whoever's at the top of the ladder. We tend to assign them the best titles. So he's brilliant, isn't he? Or she's amazing. But if we then transpose those people into the secular world, they wouldn't be brilliant or amazing. They would be average at best. And so I just hate this hyperbolizing and backslapping and pretentious hyping. It just does my head in, because actually it doesn't help anyone. There's very few people helping other people or encouraging other people to write better, to perform better. And that is the way, though, that we take back the secular world in creative terms. That's the way that we meet this new generation with the story of the gospel. If you want to tell the story of the gospel better, then you need to tell stories better. You need to know how to tell stories.
Yes.
And the place to go to learn how to tell stories is not found within the evangelical world. The old guys, who of course were English scholars, they were the best in the business at what they did, and they also happened to be Christians. You've got to be at the sharp end of things. You've got to be at the coalface, and the coalface is almost never in the Christian world. Again, I'm rambling slightly, but
you're not.
How I would encourage people, I'd encourage people, whatever they feel called to, read the best, engage with the best. You probably won't become the best, but set that as your bar, not the most recent book which by a Christian leader that could probably have just been an email, or could probably have just been a sermon, or probably is a sermon that they've transcribed. Boring.
To sum that up, I think in the musical terms, you're saying people who are Christians would go and buy the latest hard rock album by J. John or Joyce Meyer. Can you imagine that? A new metal album by Joyce Meyer. They go and buy it and they listen to it and say, actually, some really good tracks on here.
Yeah. You
should hear the track called Jesus. And you think, no, I'm sorry, it's absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
But people will buy it. Whereas a really good Christian band who have been slogging on in the motorways of life for like 5 years trying to hone their product don't get a look in.
Yeah, absolutely right. It doesn't mean that there isn't talent. It doesn't mean that there isn't natural ability. Of course there is. And it doesn't mean that there isn't calling and anointing. What it does mean is that there's almost no nurturing of artistic and creative gifts within UK Christianity. Almost none.
I could wax lyrical on that. And a lot of that is to do with COVID. And before that, where the money started to run out and money could no longer be ploughed in. And record companies are saying, tell you what, let's just do praise and worship albums. Let's forget contemporary Christian music. Let's do praise and worship albums because people will buy those. Thank you. Well, it's time then we talk about the fact that people are saying, well, he's not a very funny comedian, is he? I haven't really laughed much. It was never about that today. And you've talked about The Wayfarer, recently released. What's it about, please?
It's about journeys. I don't want to give away the ending.
No, please don't. Because I want people to go and buy it, because obviously it's compulsory now as your Prime Minister.
According to the new Andy Kine mandate as Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And you as my First Lady. It's a book about journeys. See how my tone has lightened as I start to talk about The Wayfarer.
Hasn't it just? You smile. All of a sudden, I can take a photo of that.
I'm no longer annoyed. It's about journeys. It's about a literal journey along the Pennine Way that I did a few years ago. And it's also about the journeys that we go on in life, the ups and downs, the valleys and peaks and troughs and hills. So it's about all of that. It was described by one newspaper as a cross between Bill Bryson and C.S. Lewis, which is a nice thing. It's obviously influenced, as I said earlier, by Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. I think it is a really funny book. I wanted to write something, and all opinions are available. The reader will decide how well I've achieved this. I wanted to write something that you could hold up against the great pieces of English humour from the last 150 years, and it wouldn't look out of place. And I hope that I've done that. I think it's a really funny book. But like all successful funny books, it's not important because it's funny, or rather, the humour is the vehicle, not the destination. And this is where people make mistakes when they're writing. No one wants to really read a book that is just funny all the way through. If it doesn't have drama, if it doesn't have pathos, it won't really land in the way that it might do. And comedy and humour as the vehicle for a deeper message and a deeper meaning makes comedy really effective. And so I hope I've done that. I've tried to do that in lots of my books, but I think I'd fallen prey to the ailment that I've just described, which is that I tried to be too funny, and as a result was probably less funny than I was trying to be with some of my earlier books. But with The Wayfarer, I hope I've hit the balance. I think it is very funny, but it's also lots of other things, because it's not written really to just entertain. It's not written to simply give people a good chuckle. I hope it does do that, but I hope that's not where it ends. And in that sense, it sums up my journey in my career over the last 20 years. When I started out, I just wanted to make people laugh. I wanted to be seen as funny, as a joker, as the comedian, as the funniest guy in the room. I don't care about that now. I really don't care about that. I want to be a gentleman. I want to be a good father to my daughters. I want to teach them about how Christ is the apotheosis of all the other stories, about how he's the best hope. He's the bridegroom at the end of the aisle. He's the cavalry coming over the hill. I want to write and read and sort of bathe in grace. Ray Bradbury, who is one of my favorite writers of all time, wasn't a Christian, but one of his mottos, or one of his little epithets was, he was at play in the fields of the Lord. And that's how I feel these days. I can still be quite playful, and I probably still can be quite funny socially, but I just have other things that I'm prioritizing. So hopefully all of that comes across in the Wayfarer. If it probably makes people cry as much as it makes them laugh, and that is intentional.
On YouTube, there's a 1 hour, 20 minutes video, professionally made, so well done.
Thank you, yeah.
It wasn't just done with, and then we've got an iPhone. Sounds good.
Yeah.
And you tell some great stories. Listen to the one about the monkey forest of Stoke-on-Trent, for instance. That's a very good one. And then you bring in about your divorce, which to most people would think, well, why are you showing that? Okay, it might have been a room full of Christians in the first place.
It wasn't.
That's very good to hear. What was the feedback you got from that, and how have you learnt from it yourself?
I got amazing feedback. So that's the only comedy special. That's 2.5 years ago I did that. It's the only comedy special I've ever released, and I don't plan to release another one. It was a real achievement, and it was the most stressful gig of my life, but probably the best gig of my life. And it is Beheaded Survived is the name of the show, and it is on YouTube. So I'd love people to watch that. You do have to watch the whole thing to get what it's really about.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is about being divorced. I mean, we've sort of spoiled it for people now, but you can still resonate with it. The feedback I got was that it was really funny, and it was supposed to be, and so it should be after, as was 18 years. But there was also this thing, and I think that the serious stuff hits home harder and deeper because it's gloved in comedy. I would say that I very rarely managed to do that over 20 years, but I think I did do it with that. Very easy to seem trite when you're using comedy and then moving into a message. But I think because I knew the material and I knew the story, and it was a friendly crowd. I didn't know all of them at all, but it was a friendly crowd. I think it worked on that occasion. It is a show, ironically, that I've struggled to do elsewhere. I can't really do it in churches because the moment you say you're divorced in a church comedy gig, everybody is worried or sad or sympathetic. And that's not what you need from them. You just need them to listen to the story. So I'll never do that show again, but I do bits of it all the time. I just felt like that's what I wanted to do with the show. That's what I wanted to achieve. And some of the feedback I got was that one of the nicest emails, ironically, was it was so nice that there wasn't a single swear word in there. And on that occasion, I thought, yes, that is nice, that I did an hour and 40 show condensed into an hour and 20 minutes, and that there wasn't any bad language, because there didn't need to be. And I was glad that people noticed.
Yes.
So I do affirm, if you can be really funny and not swear, brilliant. And with that material, I didn't need to swear on that occasion. The feedback was that it was powerful. And there is a little tiny, not a gospel message, but the last line of the show is a quote from Romans. So there was a little bit in there. I'm not a street preacher, and as a storyteller, I don't prescribe courses of action for people. I just describe things and allow people to think about it themselves. Yeah, Beheaded Survived is on YouTube, and ironically, Martin, because it's an hour and 20 minutes, most people who've watched the first half of the show don't know I'm divorced.
What did your ex-wife think of it?
No, I've got no idea.
Consequently, though, we mentioned the evangelical. What knockbacks have you had from Mr. Evangelical with his clipboard coming to you saying, well, I'm here, but these are what I believe, and he suddenly mentioned the D word. So what knockbacks have you had?
Well, again, you probably don't hear about the knockbacks, do you? And I think probably because I'm quite grumpy and I'm 6 foot tall and I've got a skinhead, people don't confront me on things.
With a Millwall football shirt on.
Yeah, that's right. I have had over time people say God hates divorce and things like that. And I agree, because I hate it as well. And I really encourage people, if at all possible, and often it is possible, not to get divorced. There are too many marriages that break down when they don't need to, because divorce is catching. It's an ideology that's catching, because it's a sort of false dream of freedom and hope. But I'll tell you something, it promises more than it delivers. And it didn't promise me very much. I didn't choose it. But it promises a lot more than it actually delivers. And particularly when you have children, once you have children, your life is about them. You are the prologue. They are the main storyline. And I think what you must not do, the most shameful thing you can do as a parent, is to sacrifice your children on the altar of romantic gratification. Absolutely diabolical. And even now, sort of 8 years on from the separation, I am committed only to my girls, and I'm very, very unlikely to change that, because I wouldn't ever do anything. I would hate to do anything that would have a negative effect on them. I'd hate to do something that they didn't want or that they're not ready for. And so, yes, hence why I'm a bit of a loner, I think. Hence why I keep myself to myself, trying to keep myself out of trouble, probably. Yeah, certainly Christians are not great when they hear about divorce because they think it shouldn't happen. And I think it shouldn't happen, but sometimes it does. For me, I preach about this at the moment in my new preach. I came to a point where I had to stop believing for a miracle, whilst at the same time maintaining my faith in the God who does miracles. And they seem quite similar. They're next door neighbours, but they live very different lives. Not everything comes back, but we have to hold on to the God who invented redemption and loves to transform narratives into redemptive stories.
Previous guest some time ago shared similar to what you said, that they got divorced. And then a few months later, had an email from his ex-wife saying, well, you need to hear my side of the story. And it wasn't what I wanted to do on there. I think she understood that because we wrote back to her. So she sort of understood, hopefully.
I don't claim that I was the good guy. I was the bad guy. Well, I talk about this in another podcast. That's why if people want to hear about the real story, there's another podcast with Simon Gillibo that I'm on. I was the bad guy because I was neglectful and I took it for granted. And I failed to properly love. I failed to properly pursue. So I was the bad guy. I don't blame her for wanting to not be married to me anymore. I think we've probably both suffered the consequences of it. And I think it shouldn't. I think it could have been rescued. I think it should have been rescued, but it wasn't. And again, she wasn't the bad guy in that situation. There we go.
Thank you for your honesty.
Always.
No, seriously. To me, that takes a lot of guts to say that.
Well, I've said it before, though, so.
It doesn't matter. We can all say things and then sort of put it under the carpet and not touch it again. So the fact that you said that, I think that will resonate with many a person listening today. That shows the mark of the man that you are, I think, with your faith as well, that you were able to say that without going on a tour to preach about it, like some Christians might end up doing, to talk about, oh, look at me, this is what I've done in the past.
Yeah. I've got no time for self-pity. I have camped in that valley, of course, but no time for self-pity. At some point, you don't move on necessarily, but you do have to get on with things, and his mercies are new each morning. And yeah, I do think you can probably trace where I am now, all the characteristics I have now, both the good and the bad ones. When I say the bad ones, I probably mean that I'm a bit grumpy, that I am a bit elusive, that I am a bit dour at times, but also I probably have more wisdom. I certainly have a deeper writing ability. I'm certainly better at telling stories. You can trace that back to the 1st of December 2017, I think. And I don't think it's a great trade-off. But I couldn't have written any of my last 4 books if I hadn't been through that. Again, I would swap it. I would take it back. I would cash in all of my books and unwrite all of them, even now. What is certainly not true is when people say, when a relationship ends, God's got something better for you. That's not true. It's a terrible thing to say. It's meaningless and nonsensical. When someone's grandmother dies, it's not because God's got a better grandmother for them or another grandmother for them. It's stupid. It's absolutely inane. But what the Lord always does is walk with you through the valley and tell you and guide you towards the place where the foothills are. God always does that because, again, he's the author of redemption. Redemption, sadly, isn't always the same as restoration. But I would say that as I sit here now, I feel that both I and my life have been redeemed. And I really, again, kick around in God's blessings a lot of the time. At some point, you have to accept, you have to open that KIA letter on the doormat, and then you have to still go about your day.
Brilliant answer. And you're not grumpy. You're just being honest.
Oh, yeah. Grumpy.
No. You're grumpy when you get to my age, okay? Trust me on that. Yeah. Wait till you get to 50 and beyond. Well, it's an automatic right to be grumpy. You're allowed.
Okay, great. I've sort of cashed in those chips 5 years too early.
Well,
I'm enjoying it, Martin. I'm enjoying it.
Well, there you go. Very quickly before we get to the last question, because you said something right at the beginning and said I'd love to come back and touch on that. And it is the C word. You said you were a coward.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, I am a coward, generally speaking. I think all of us are capable of acting in cowardly ways, and maybe that can manifest in different ways. It can be you don't challenge somebody who needs to be challenged. It could be that you believe something that's convenient to believe, even though you haven't done the research as to whether it's true or not. It can be putting yourself forward for something Because often we don't put ourselves forward for things which we really want to do well at. Because if we don't put ourselves forward, then we'll always have the deniability, won't we? Let's say that there was an FA Cup for comedy. There isn't. And I thought I had a chance of winning it. But I didn't enter, because then forever I'd be able to say, oh, well, I think I might have won that if I'd entered it.
Yes.
You get that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And the idea of it, the ideal of it. And I suppose that's what I mean. I was a coward. I don't have a specific situation that I'm talking about, but I think I'm traditionally and historically likely to take the path of least resistance. Another way that we can be cowardly, and I've done this as well, is when you feel like God has really said something to you out of the blue about a person standing next to you at a coffee shop or something, or on a train, and you don't share it. Oh, this is a funny story. I was on a train once. It was when I was in my sort of street evangelism era, and I prayed in my head. There was a young lad sitting next to me. I said, Lord, have you got anything for this guy? And I felt the Lord say, as in the thought that dropped into my head was, his name's Martin, just tell him I love him. And I thought, well, he's probably not called Martin. No one's called Martin. He was 21 or something. No one's called Martin. So I didn't say anything. Anyway, gets his bank card out later, and on his bank card is written the name Martin. And at that point, it's too late. I can't say you called Martin. So I didn't actually say anything to him. So that was cowardly, because I'd asked God for something and he'd actually given it to me. And I just thought, oh, no, that's probably just my mind. So, yeah, I've been cowardly in lots of ways. But I hope that these days I'm not a coward, actually, because I think you are part sanctification. But the joy of having the Holy Spirit, the joy of the word being living and active, is that you actually can change. You actually can change, and you can become more like Jesus. And we do become more like Jesus. And we have to make the right choices. Wisdom doesn't come with age. It comes with understanding the choices that are available to you and making the right one this time instead of the wrong one last time. You can change. You can be less cowardly. You can choose to treat people better. You can choose to love God more. And we become our choices, don't we? So I'm very hopeful, and I do believe it's true. Generally speaking, I'm a very different person to the person that my wife left, and maybe a bit of a Pyrrhic victory in a sense. But again, that's what grace is. That's what the promise of redemption is. The story is not over.
No, it's not. And if we take your name, Kind, the next step up from kind is kinder, and then from kinder to kindest.
Yeah.
You definitely in that kinder moment.
I'm looking up towards kind. I'll let you know when I get to at least.
No, I think you're further ahead on that and kinder. When you are in kinder, of course, you can make an egg and sell it under your name.
There we go. Yeah.
People work that one through.
I call my daughters kindlings, as in little kind.
Yes.
In German. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've got an amazing gift in, and I'm not just saying this because I can say it, obviously I can, but as a preacher, wow, there's so much depth that you've shared today from what you've learnt. I think you've got an incredible gift of being honest and open.
I think it helps that I'm not accountable to an organisation. I don't work for a church. I don't work for a denomination. I'm not reliant on any particular organisation or place or person for my income. So if I say things that people really dislike, that's okay. I don't go out of my way to offend, but I don't go out of my way not to offend either. I just don't really care about that. You've got to deal with your own feelings. I'm never cruel, and I never deliberately insult anybody or anything. But you can't legislate for how people will respond to what you say, because everybody brings their own baggage and muscle memory to whatever they're consuming. And I do the same thing. I think that I feel more able to say what I think on a subject, because, again, even if people don't like it, I can sort of vanish into the woods where I belong in my little shepherd's hut.
Middle Earth.
Yeah, back into Middle Earth. So
absolutely brilliant. And for those that have been encouraged, please encourage Andy. Be kind to Andy.
Buy the Wayfarer and be kind to me.
Well, they've got to. It's compulsory.
Yes.
You already made it as the Prime Minister. Yeah. Which leads me on to the very last question. Thank you so much, Andy, for your time. Andy Kind, who is your Christian hero, please?
Alfred the Great.
Tell me more.
The Book of Common Law that our courts are founded on is based on the laws set out by Alfred. Laws which came out of his own Christian faith. So not only did he turn back the Vikings, not only was he a great leader, not only was he the first king of the English, and as an Englishman, as a gentleman, I appreciate that, but he was a man of such wisdom and faith. I don't glory in people killing other people, even if they are invaders. I do love the fact that his Christian faith caused him to lead in a way that our courts still are guided by.
See, I never knew he was a Christian.
Oh, he's a profoundly Christian man. So King Alfred the Great.
Well, that's a great answer. Well, in fact, I'm going to ask you to write a book based on your thoughts of Alfred the Great and what it means to you in the coming years ahead for you. There you go.
Great idea.
Thank you. Can I buy the film rights?
It's a deal.
Andy, I've really enjoyed what we've had to say. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a privilege, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Cheers. God bless. And if you haven't already hit the like and subscribe button, please do. Next time on Off-Grid Christianity, this episode is extra special as it pays tribute to the entrepreneur and titan within the UK Christian media, Peter Meadows. Peter sadly passed away on Friday, 9th of January 2026, aged 84. Peter was the founder behind many of the UK Church's most loved ministries, including Buzz, later Premier Christianity, Spring Harvest, and Premier Christian Radio. Paying tribute in this episode are the Reverend Cindy Kent, Graham Kendrick, Noel Richards, Michael Harvey, Joseph Steinberg, Rob Parsons, Dave Pope, Zana Stewart, Jeff Lucas, and Steve Chalk. Peter was a guest in episode 62 of OGC. My co-presenter for this tribute to Peter is a previous guest as well, and who recently wrote the obituary which was published in Premier Christianity, and that is Steve Goddard. Until then, cheerio.